Horizon Jan Somrusuji Reaction. This is D-Day, The Secret War, Extra History Part 2 by the channel Extra Credits. Yeah, I saw the first part yesterday of the D-Day. D-Day is just, I know somebody said this is not really a turning point. No, I don't mean turning point as that. It's, Allied forces were trying to invade, German occupied lands. And this was the day when they did that. So turning point in that sense. I mean, obviously Stalingrad and everything was really important, but I meant Allied forces attacking in that sense. This was turning point. But all the things that went into orchestrating this thing, all the fake armies, fake tanks, and deception, all this all these spy agencies trying to deliver fake information. It was really ridiculous. This was a major scale event that happened. Also, the German messaging was encoded Enigma codes. They also cracked that around this time. So that was something. So D-Day is just ridiculous. World War II, the biggest war of them all, with one of the biggest casualties of them all, ended with the atomic bomb. Can there be bigger historical event than World War II? And this D-Day is just ridiculous how it happened. It was all chaotic from the day one. It never went the way they wanted to. All the soldiers either landed on the waters, landed in the enemy territories. The weather was not in their side. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. Especially all those barges opening up. All the soldiers coming out to the machine gun fire. Damn. Imagine if their intel failed to deceive German forces, and the full German force were at the Normandy and all the other beaches. How effed up that would have been. Remember, if you like my reaction, don't forget to like, subscribe, check out the reaction, this is a link in the description, check out the cards with different playlists, check out the end cards, and yeah, let's watch this one.
The south of England had become a vast military camp, jam-packed with hundreds of thousands of soldiers, all planning on a trip to the Normandy beaches in the early summer. The job of the British Security Service, MI5, was to make sure that on D-Day, the Germans were looking the other way. If they failed, tens of thousands of men would die. This episode is sponsored by Wargaming. New players can download World of Tanks and use the code NEPTUNE for free goodies. Link in the description. In August 1942, desperate to score a success in the face of an unending string of military setbacks and defeats, the Allies carried out a daring raid on the French port of Dieppe. But the Germans were ready for them, fortified and prepared for the attack. It was an unmitigated disaster, leaving almost 4,000 Canadians dead on the beaches. This catastrophe convinced everybody that when the real invasion of France came, the Germans must not be prepared for it, or D-Day would mean destruction. This was, of course, going to be a little tricky. By 90 days after D-Day, the US Army alone planned to have 1.2 million men with all of their equipment in France. You can't just hide that under a bit of camouflage netting. And so was born Operation Fortitude, the most ambitious deception plan in military history. The operation wouldn't pretend that there was to be no invasion. That would be impossible. Instead, their goal would be to fool the Germans about how many were coming, when they would land, and where they would land. Army groups were positioned around Britain to confuse the Germans. The British Fourth Army was stationed in Scotland, supposedly preparing to attack Norway. General George Patton became the proud commander of the 1st U.S. Army Group stationed on the English coast opposite the Pas de Calais, the closest crossing to France. The British 4th and the US 1st were somewhat unusual armies in that there were no actual people in them. They were completely fake, made up, non-existent. The Allies had no real soldiers to spare. They were all needed in France for the actual invasion. So to get the Germans to fall for this massive bluff, the film industry...
Film industry, look at that. Hollywood helped, I guess. Yeah. Obviously, they would need all the soldiers. It's not like Germans are just small forces. Nazis, they're nothing. You need every single soldier you have. So obviously, they're like, screw it. Let's create a fake army. I mean, imagine being at that, I guess, war table, right? Before that, in World War I, nobody did this shit. In any wars, nobody did this. So this is first time, just like, oh, what, let's create some fake armies. And everybody's just looking at each other like, what? And somebody's like, yeah, fuck it, why not? It makes sense. So around that time, people were just like, grasping at straws, I guess. Like, yeah, anything goes, I guess. Screw it, let's create fake army.
Was called in. They created a brilliant illusion, an entire dummy army. Wooden aircraft, inflatable tanks, 250 fake landing craft. 2 fake core headquarters were invented, pouring out a constant stream of radio drivel. At one point, King George VI even made an official inspection visit, solemnly inspecting row after row of blow-up tanks and real troops who had been bussed in.
Imagine that, just to release to the press, like, oh, he's checking army, while he knows that these are not real. Both of them are smiling like, yeah, look at that, real soldiers. They are not real soldiers. They're like, oh, look at that, I'm a king and this is what I'm doing. But damn, look at the deception level. Just so Germans would get the word, like king is actually, checking all this out. There is no issue there. Kings would not do that. If this were any, fake army or any kind of a deception thing was at play, why would king visit? So, yeah.
For the day, all while the daily newsreel broadcast this inspection to the world. George even managed to look thoroughly impressed. And, because you might as well go big or go home, this...
Like, oh, look at that shit. This thing can fly 100 miles per hour. Look at that.
Inflatable First U.S. Army was presented not just as a threat, but as the threat. The primary invasion force to be launched at the Pas de Calais. The Germans already considered this to be the most likely destination for the Allied attack. Now the Allies just needed to make sure that the Germans continued to believe that. And so was born MI5's 20 Committee, so called for the XX Roman numeral.
Okay, so far, Hitler has been, smart, let's just say. He's the one who basically told the German people, they give me a bit of money here and there to give the money to the government so they can give you your own car, a Beetle. He created the company of Volkswagen just for that reason, even though he never wanted to create a Beetle. He never cared about Volkswagen to begin with. That was just his deception technique. He just wanted money so you can in the side he can create all these tanks and all the weapons and things. So he knows deception technique very well. So how he'd invent, like, okay, king is literally walking and checking all these tanks and soldiers, and they're broadcasting it to the world. They're actually showing to the world, like, we are going to invade. I mean, wouldn't any army keep this down low? Like, let's not broadcast throughout the world what we are going to do. So then Hitler go like, there is something wrong here. That's a weird thing. But I guess, at the height of these things, when he took France and everything, at points like that, people don't think like that. People are on the edge, and when every of your general is telling you the Calais is a place that Allied forces will attack, and then the broadcast also tells you that Calais is where they're going to attack. I guess at that point he's just like, what? Maybe Allied forces are stupid. That's why they're broadcasting something like that. But it worked.
Numerals, double cross. Double Cross fed the Germans a constant stream of highly credible intel, a combination of utter rubbish and brilliant information delivered just too late to be useful. Back in 1939, the British had turned a German agent into a double agent. He was pretty useless, but he had told MI5 everything they needed to know about how the German Secret Service communicated with their agents. The 20 Committee used this information to create an entire network of double agents. By D-Day, Germany's entire network of spies in Britain was owned by the 20 Committee. One agent was a Catalan codenamed Garbo. Garbo created a completely fictitious network of 27 agents who bombarded the German embassy in Madrid with messages, presenting an utterly convincing and utterly false picture. The real attack, they said, would come in the Pas de Calais. Any other perceived invasions, such as, Normandy, whatever, those were feints. If you hear any guns or shouting over there, just relax, it's just the neighbors again, go back to bed. Garbo was good at his job. So good, in fact, that the Germans awarded him with the Iron Cross for his invaluable services. The danger, though.
Oh my god. Imagine being him at the time, they're giving him the Iron Cross. It's like, hey, look at that. I'm getting Iron Cross for my deception. He would be sweating at the point, right? Like, okay, what if they find out now? Damn, the spies have balls, right? I mean, obviously, all the movies and things tells you this. They show the gravity of it. But, every movie is an exaggerate at some point. When it comes to spy movies, a bit of it exaggerated, but the whole threat is real, right? I mean, whenever some spy goes, in any country, they are big balls, let's just say, because any person they see, the only thought in their head would be, the person knows I'm a spy, the person knows I'm a spy. Even the point where they're giving Iron Cross to the guy, like, okay, are they doing that because they discovered me or something? The guy would be sweating at the point. But damn, look at that, all the thing that they created, the Allied forces, all the misinformation they feed to the German army. Even that if the war breaks out at the beaches of Normandy, hey, it's just a deception army. It's not the real army. They even fed that.
Was that even if they fooled the Germans before the invasion, once the Allies landed, the deception would be over. All German military strength in France would be concentrated on Normandy, and the Allies would then no doubt be driven back into the sea. So, a series of new operations were concocted to convince the Germans that other invasions would follow the first all along the coast of France. Secrecy was critical. To help the invading forces, a complete photographic map of all of the beaches was needed. The RAF and USAAF ran hundreds of photographic missions, but they needed more. So the public were asked to send in all of their holiday beach photos. Then the toy maker Chad Valley was commissioned to take this intel and make a vast map of the operational area in jigsaw puzzle form for easy mobility.
What?
The jigsaw map was delivered by two men in two pieces. Neither of them knew which was the real one, and once the delivery was complete, neither was allowed to leave headquarters until D-Day was over. The British armed
Look, this is the one thing that I think general public does not know about, World War II, that in the D-Day and things like this, there were not just military people, lots of other people are involved too, like Hollywood, all the filmmakers for the fake army, artists, to, I guess, take all the photos and in jigsaw style create this kind of a map. It's not just army, it's other fields were also in on it. I mean, technicians to break the code, Enigma codes and things like that. Scientists too, because they were working on different things. How many different fields were involved during this World War II time? It's just ridiculous.
Forces were obsessive about security. They arranged for 30 members of the Women's Auxiliary Air Force to dress in civilian clothes and visit pubs close to where the British commandos were staying. Their job? To flirt with the men and try to get them to spill some information about their mission. To everybody's amazement and delight, the commandos kept quiet. MI5 still...
They must be really good at their job, right? Trying to spill the information from commandos, because if there's any form of direct trying to get this classified information, commandos could turn on them. Like, why are you asking? Are you German spy?
Worried that the news was out, though, and that the Germans would be ready and waiting. Back in 1942, the crossword in the Daily Telegraph newspaper had included a clue answered by the word Dieppe, just one day before the Dieppe raid had taken place. Worrisome. And now, on May 2nd, in the same crossword section came the clue, one of the US. And the answer was Utah, the code name for one of the beaches the Americans were to land on. Then, on the 22nd of May, came the answer Omaha, another beach. And then later, Mulberry and Overlord and Neptune, all code words for various D-Day operations. Finally, MI5 descended in a fury upon Leonard Daw, the schoolmaster who wrote these crosswords. Turns out that it was all just an extraordinary series of coincidences.
Ah, come on. Really? Really? Come on. All of them were coincidence, all of them. Especially, day before, when they were about to, raid one of the beaches, that same name was on the crossword puzzle a day before. I mean, all these names sounds military type of name, right? I mean, why would you put that in your crossword puzzle? Maybe I'm reading too much, but I highly doubt that those were just coincidence. What if he was German spy or something, trying to signal, Nazi or, any command like that? All the Nazi spies were, was double turned by the British, right? So maybe he didn't know that, and he was trying to, I guess, signal one of the Nazis somehow. But he didn't know that all of them are turned to the British side. Maybe he was, the Nazi defector or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much to it, but this is highly doubtful that, it was all a coincidence. Utah and everything, come on.
Remained. Had all of this deception and secrecy worked? And how would the Allies know if it had? They needed to be able to read German communications to be sure. The Germans used an extraordinarily complex encoding system, Enigma. The codes were changed daily, and there were 159 million possible permutations. German messages should have been impossible to read, but the British thought that they could crack the code. They assembled a team of brilliant mathematicians like Alan Turing at Bletchley Park to do it. Then the Allies had a lucky break. In May of 1941, a British ship forced a German U-boat to the surface. The Germans abandoned their sinking craft, but in the final moment, the British sailors managed to board and capture the most unimaginable treasure: a completely intact code machine and code books. Soon, and for much of the rest of the war, the British were routinely reading German messages.
Yeah, this is the Bombay machine, BOMBE or something. I think Alan Turing, other people created this. This laid the foundation for the computer, basically. Not directly, but in a way, this was the first machine that can come close to being a computer. Even though it had only one task, you can see it's an breaking encryption machine. So in a way, yeah.
One estimate has suggested that the intelligence gained from this find may have shortened the war by more than 2 years. It was through that intelligence that the Allies learned that the 20 Committee had been stunningly successful. When the balloon finally went up, every key German commander greeted the news of operations in Normandy as an invasion, but not the invasion. Critical German focus, men, and material remained on the Pas de Calais even after D-Day, confusing, slowing, and weakening the German response. It was little short of a miracle.
Yeah.
And so D-Day began for the British and Canadian forces. The British beaches were called Gold and Sword, and the Canadian beach Juno. Churchill had insisted on proper names rather than silly code names, saying that no mother wanted to hear that her son had given his life at the Bunny Hug landings. The British parachute drop, despite massive confusion, achieved most objectives in the face of incredible odds. 700 men and a complete glider train of artillery were supposed to be sent to capture a critical German battery, but when all of the equipment and most of the men were lost in the landing, the 150 remaining soldiers, armed only with rifles and Sten guns, took the battery nonetheless. It's 7:25 a.m. at Sword Beach. Mine-clearing tanks.
See, the thing is, with the Allied forces, the morale was as high as it can be. Even condition might be rough. What was at the stake, knowing what Nazis were planning, and after taking France and most of Europe, what are they going to do in the future? This was now or never type of thing. So at this point, everybody just knew, even without much of a pep talk, everybody just knew that this cannot go wrong, regardless of what. So rather than 700, 800 people, just 150 left, yeah, well, we'll have to do. That was the mentality at the time. And they actually came through because they had to. Nothing can go wrong around this time. It's all just all of the gears had to fit, right? Other machines falls apart. That was a mentality at that point, that everything had to go perfectly, otherwise the whole operation falls apart. And also, this is there's a saying like you have to keep simplicity while in any operation, because too many things to do, too many things can go wrong. While in this D-Day thing here, there was so many things at play, right? So many deceptions, so many different fake attacks to mask where you're going to go. Lots of things were at play here. So lots of things could have gone wrong too, but they didn't. And D-Day was a success. But anything here and there would have fallen apart, and D-Day, I don't want to say it would have failed completely, but it would have been, it would be war worse than it actually was.
Thrash the sand. Sappers run beside them to disable mines and obstacles, frequently falling to enemy fire along the way. Then come tanks and flamethrowers throwing themselves at the German defenses on the dunes. And only then come the landing craft to release their cargoes of men. In the chaos, the schedule collapses in only half an hour. The beach has become a tangle of men, machinery, twisted wreckage, a chaos of dead, dying, and living. The air is filled with the roar of gunfire. Every moment is a drama of comedies, tragedies, and moments of heroism. But despite the cost, the landing at Sword was remarkably successful. By 9 p.m., many units were off the beaches and moving inland. At Juno, Canadian losses were heavier, but they soon broke through the coastal defenses, as did the British at Gold. The landing plan had worked amazingly well considering. Almost everywhere, the German coastlines had been rolled up, and the Allies had complete control of the air. The Luftwaffe was nowhere to be seen. Now was the time to strike hard and fast into the interior, to exploit the Germans' shock and seize the vital objectives, including the major town of Caen. There was a period of calm as men brewed up to recover from the initial assault, and then they moved inland to link up with the airborne units. Unfortunately, the beachheads behind them were a massive traffic jam. The roads were chaos, and their armor support was still fighting their way through that traffic to reach them. And the Germans continued to fight hard. Key strongpoints resisted and slowed the British and Canadian infantry's advance. At 6 p.m., a unit of the King's Shropshire Light Infantry came under heavy fire 3 miles short of Caen and dug in for the night. With little armored support, pressing the attack and capturing the town was not an option. That night, men lay across a 60-mile stretch with their weapons, peering into a darkness lit by flares, tracer, and shells. D-Day had been a remarkable success, but as elite German divisions approached, the fight for Normandy was about to begin, and it would be harder than any could imagine. Thanks again to
I mean, Germans, for whatever reason, I mean, knowing the Prussia before Germany, how Prussia was, it kind of makes sense. But Germany is just, all that equipment and everything was just way too OP. Luftwaffe and everything is way too OP when you really compare to the other type of, other allied forces and everything. And now attacking German side rather than defending, now you're at the offense, you're actually trying to attack, Germany's occupied France. This is deception was really important, because if that had failed and there was Luftwaffe there, all the main elite forces there, and this would have gone horribly wrong, because they are really overpowering. So now after this, and they probably will land 1 million soldiers there next part or something. Now the fighting the main German force, that is just effed up. And the success happened because everybody's morale was high. Like I said, they had to win this. This is the day all the fighting turns, I guess. This is the time where Germany starts to lose. So everybody's morale was up, and that helped. Otherwise, Germany's equipment, jet planes, tanks were really OP. Alright people, that was D-Day, The Secret War, Extra History Part 2. If you like my Rick Sunday, like, subscribe, check out the Rick Sunday, there's a link to the season. Check out the cast, please check out the end cards, and yeah, I'll see you next time.